On today's show, the biggest storyline surrounding the Hurricanes and Capitals next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So in this special crossover edition of Locked On Capitals and Locked On Hurricanes, we talk about notable stats, X factors, and predictions. This is going to be quite a series between the Caps and Canes. What are some of those notable stats? I'll talk about that a bit later. I'll talk about key players to watch in this series. What is the netminding situation going to be for the Capitals and the Hurricanes? I'll talk about that. But to get going here, we'll talk about the Capitals versus Canes, the biggest storylines surrounding both teams. And in this edition, I'm joined by the host of Locked On Hurricanes, Zach Martin. I talk to him next. Hello and welcome into this special crossover edition of Locked On Capitals and Locked On Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In today's episode, I am joined by Zach Martin of Locked On Hurricanes. Zach, welcome to the show.
Yeah, no, thanks, Dan. Looking forward to talking around too with you. And I know we kind of had some other crossovers at some points around the network, but it's good to have our first playoff one together. Really excited about it. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And as I reflect back on this last season, it was an even series between the Capitals and the Hurricanes. And the one thing that I know for sure is that it's going to be that much more difficult. You take a look at the Hurricanes, they're on to the next round after taking down the Devils, and the Capitals taking down the Canadiens, that it is going to be quite a match, I'm sure. So going into this series in round number 2, what is the biggest storyline surrounding the Hurricanes?
I'd say probably the biggest storyline is just keeping the momentum of their special teams going, because that was the big question coming in. Was you had the number 1 penalty kill unit in the entire NHL, second year in a row. Same thing, ho-hum, no big deal for them on that side. But the power play, though, you were top 10 at one point. December started to slow down a little bit. January, it completely just went ice cold. And you finished 25th in the entire league. And that was like, okay, Dan, as you know, what are the cliche things? Can you win on the road? And can your power play be productive? And that was a big question for the Canes, because their road record wasn't great either. Go win on the road in game 4, check mark. Hey, that's done. Power play, how about 6 for 19 for 31%, being 5th in the entire first round? And you will gladly take that if you're the Carolina Hurricanes. Oh, and their PK, only team to go 100%, 15 for 15. So check that mark off as well. So as long as you can keep that rolling, I think the Hurricanes are going to be able to just continually build on that success. And hopefully, if this thing does go long, then at least you can probably steal a couple games here and there if you need to, or at least still be effective. So that's, for me, it's like, can you keep this power play, penalty kill, whole special teams thing going? Even if, the penalty kill is, maybe you let 1 or 2 in, because it's hard to go perfect the whole way. But as long as your power play is still getting, still being productive, I think that goes a long way for the Hurricanes to, help them in their progression for the playoffs.
So the big question that I have for you as well is about Rod Brind'Amour. He was brought in as the head coach of the team so many years ago, and I think the bar was set that much higher when Rod Brind'Amour joined the team. If you take a look at what we've seen from him so far as behind the bench, what kind of role and what has he meant for the Hurricanes, and what is the expectation for the Hurricanes? If they get eliminated here in the second round, is it considered a failure for him, or is the bar set high that it's Stanley Cup final or bust?
I would say for this, I mean, you're looking at a team who, all intents and purposes, a lot of people kind of saw this as a transition. You know, a lot of guys that left. Some people are predicting that they make the playoffs or finish on a wild card, and they end up getting 99 points and finishing second in the Metro, top 5 in the entire East. And that's with a lot of turnover and a lot of stuff going on the trade deadline. So if they get bounced in the second round, it's not great. But hey, you know, it's your 7th straight consecutive playoffs, 7 straight playoff series wins. Yeah, that's not the end goal, but at least for the Hurricanes, even when people look down at this season as it's a transition, well, how the Hurricanes is going to be, you kind of exceeded those expectations. And now you're kind of setting yourself up for a good 25-26 season. So for me, obviously the end goal is to win the cup, but Rod Brind'Amour is not going to be on a hot seat if it doesn't go the way that people thought it was too. So I think just where he's at and the success of what he's been as a coach for the Hurricanes, I don't really see them going in any other direction, because like if you do get rid of him, who's really available that could take you to the next step that what Rod Brind'Amour has done, being the first coach to go, you know, since I think it was like Red Kelly or someone's going like 7 for 7, making the playoffs, winning, you know, rounds and stuff like that. So it's just tough to like you can't really move on in this instance. So for me, yeah, Rod is, depending how it goes, he's going to be in Carolina regardless. But I mean, obviously the end goal is cup. But if it's a second round exit, hey, it is what it is. It's unfortunate, but the team looked really good for next year too. So it's just another building year.
So if we take a look at it, how much pressure is on this roster? It is a bit aging. Jordan Stahl on this team. I know that you guys had Ratton in for a hot minute there. That how much pressure is on the Hurricanes roster if they are eliminated in the second round? Do you see big changes with this team, or is that not the expectation?
I don't really think there's a lot of pressure, because if you look at the roster right now, I mean, the only contracts you got coming off the books are Orlov, Burns, and that's kind of really about maybe a couple forwards. So they're more of like the Jack Roslovics, Eric Robinsons. They just re-signed Frederik Andersen to a 1-year deal at less than $3 million. So that's a good, you know, security for them to kind of roll at that tandem once again, because the goalie market right now going to free agency is kind of not that great. So now you're kind of shoring up yourself with your current tandem. And you look, and the decor is pretty much kind of already set up for next year. You got Scott Morrow, who's going to move up. You got Alexander Nikishin, who's going to have a full offseason to get ready to go. You might have to add a depth 7th defenseman. You might have to add like maybe a depth forward, depending if you do bring Eric Robinson back. That'd be good for him as a guy you can have in your lineup. They just, you know, extended Taylor Hall last week as well for another 3 seasons. At that point, the Hurricanes are kind of looking at, okay, who can we bring into the top 6? So there's probably going to be like one maybe huge addition, a lot of depth for the most part. But I don't see a lot of turnover with this team, because pretty much you've got 11 forwards already locked up. And pretty much your whole decor is locked up too, and your 2 netminders. For me, I don't really see, you know, a whole roster turnover. It's just adding a massive key piece and then depth pieces for the Hurricanes.
Yeah, so I don't think the pressure's too great for the Hurricanes kind of as an outsider. I think the team's in a good position. I think there was kind of the thought that Ratton's gone. It's not going to be that great, but all things considered, the Hurricanes are doing great things. As far as the Capitals are concerned, you know, you take a look at how they struggled in the latter part of the season. I know that they bounced back against the Canadiens, but the big storyline for me surrounding the Capitals is, can they keep it going? I can't forget what happened at the latter part of the season, where this team struggled despite winning the Metro Division, despite winning the Eastern Conference. Can they turn that around? And also a similar question that I'll talk to you about a little bit later is in net. Can Logan Thompson continue to be dialed in? Netminding, I think, is going to be a key storyline for both teams. Freddie Andersen, you take a look at Logan Thompson, and then the respective backups on our teams here. How will that fare if it's Charlie Lindgren in there, for example, for the Capitals? So netminding, and then also the big storyline for me is physicality. That is one of the strong suits of the Capitals that we saw in round number 1, where Tom Wilson took out Carrier, and that changed the series altogether in Game 4, where the Capitals, the Canadians were kind of really throwing the kitchen sink at the Capitals, and for that big hit on Carrier, that is what turned the momentum for the Capitals. Ultimately, in a lot of ways, I think they would have still won the series, of course, but they went to Bell Center. The Canadians took a game, and then if they would have won the second game at Bell Center, the feeling was, were they going to be able to take that momentum and push them forward? So I think that physicality, Tom Wilson, Duhaime, Dylan McElrath, if he's in the mix, that could definitely play a big role in what we see with the Capitals and the Canadiens. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about key players to look at. And listen, there is plenty of firepower on both respective teams. What are some of the big players to look at on both teams? I'll discuss straight ahead. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you've never been to a live NHL playoff game, it's unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it's next level. And thanks to Game Time, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever. Game Time is the fastest way to grab playoff tickets. Even for those must-see matchups, prices actually drop as puck drop gets closer. And with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60%. So do that. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. The all-in pricing shows you the total cost up front, no surprise fees at checkout. The app even shows you panoramic seat views, so you know exactly what you're getting before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, welcome back into this special crossover edition of Locked On Capitals and Locked On Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In today's episode, I am joined by Zach Martin of Locked On Hurricanes. Now, we were talking a little bit on the pre-interview about some players that have a lot of offensive firepower. I'm going to start with you here as you are the host of Locked On Hurricanes, and just taking a look at some of the goal leaders. Sebastian Aho, taking a look at it, 29 goals. Seth Jarvis, 32 goals. Andrei Svechnikov, 20 goals. There is a lot of double-digit goal scorers on your team. First of all, let's dive into that. Talk about key players to look for as a Capitals fan, and the fans that are listening that are Capitals fans here. What players should we look out for on the Hurricanes?
Yeah, no, of course. I think the obvious ones, you look at Sebastian Aho, led the team in the first round, 8 points, scored half the team's power play goals because they had 6. He had 3 of them, and 2 of them came in Game 5, made it 4-4 to tie it up to send it to overtime. And then, of course, gets the double overtime game winner on the power play. He's that guy you always have to keep an eye on. Seth Jarvis, another career season, even while missing 7 games. Tied his point total from last year, set a new career high in assists, led the team in goals. And, he's just someone who's really turned into, I would say, that two-way, 200-foot player. And I wouldn't be surprised, Dan, if we see Seth Jarvis finishing in the top 5 for the Selke. I know we already have our Selke finalists, but in terms of overall voting, don't be surprised if Seth Jarvis isn't somewhere in the top 5, because he's just taking his game to another level. And this is only his 4th season in the NHL. He's already top 30 all time in franchise history in points. Back-to-back 67-point seasons. This is a guy who's just going to keep getting better and better. Of course, we all know Andrei Svechnikov and Alexander Ovechkin throwing some knuckles back in 2019, but he's had an okay regular season. Wasn't the greatest in his standards, but he did have 5 goals, which led the team in the first round, so that's another guy to look out for. I would say another one that's going to be sneaky good for the Hurricanes that Capitals fans might want to keep an eye on, Jackson Blake. Rookie season, 17 goals, 34 points. Had a very, he was just someone who was able to know his role, set up key plays. Yeah, he wasn't bounced off the score sheet like, oh, he's not like an 8-point Aho or those guys. But he had 4 points in 5 games, but he's someone who's had the dynamic of just growing over his time as a rookie in the NHL, and someone who I think was very underrated. We need to look at, Celebrini and all these other guys. He's someone who's was just under the radar, who I think could be a hidden X factor for the Hurricanes. And of course, you can't overlook Taylor Hall. Comes over from Chicago, has a really good run with the Canes. Had a couple of helpers in game 1, and just got a 3-year extension. So give him that little bit of an extension bump. I think those are a lot of guys you can keep an eye out for. Of course, you can never count out Jacob Slavin, just being the best defensive defenseman in the NHL. That's a guy you definitely need to keep an eye on too, because he's a good, sneaky, accurate goal scorer. I mean, I think it was 4 when they won in New Jersey. I don't know how much more upper shelf you can hit that puck over Markstrom shoulder. It was very clean by Mr. Slavin. So, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of outstanding players, doing a deep dive on the Hurricanes, kind of preparing for this series. Sebastian Aho leading the team with 8 points in round 1. He really drives the offense and sets the pace. From what I notice, Andrei Svechnikov scored 5 goals in the opening round, including a Game 4 hat trick.
Yep.
That is most impressive. Seth Jarvis, a strong performer against the Caps historically, so something to look out for, and a key secondary scoring option, of course. And we'll talk about this in the third segment, is Frederik Andersen and Peter Kotekov. Sorry if I'm not nailing his last name all the way there, but all things considered, some key players for the Hurricanes that the Capitals, I think we are really going to have to look out for. As far as key players to look for the Capitals, of course, Tom Wilson, good old number 43, the future of your Capitals, make no mistake about it, the emotional and physical barometer for the Capitals. If you're not familiar, for the Hurricanes fans, I'm sure you are at the end of the day, his bruising style flipped that Montreal series like I talked about, and his presence could tilt the balance against a Carolina defense that struggles with net front battles. Dylan Strome, again, another guy that has grown by leaps and bounds, a guy that was put on the scrap heap by the Chicago Blackhawks, leading scorer in round 1 and one of the hottest players in the postseason so far. His matchup against Carolina could be pivotal. Of course, we cannot forget about Alex Ovechkin at 39 years old, knocking it out of the park, catching and passing. Wayne Gretzky putting up 4 goals in the first round. Ovi scored the first playoff OT goal of his career in round 1. The heartbeat of this team. If Tom Wilson is the barometer, Alex Ovechkin is the heartbeat of this team. And like we'll talk about here, Logan Thompson, Charlie Lindgren, Logan Thompson, who got injured in round 1, Frederik Andersen, who got injured in round 1. What will that mean for the respective teams? A lot of storylines to follow. This is going to be an exciting series. That much I know for sure. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about notable stats, X factors, and predictions. How many games is it going to take for the Capitals or the Canes to win it? We'll discuss straight ahead. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivered incredible results. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day with multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps find affordable top-tier freelancers to scale my business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. All right, and welcome back into this third segment of Crossover Locked On Capitals and Locked On Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In today's episode, I am joined by Zach Martin of Locked On Hurricanes. So as we go into round number 2, we talked about stats, we talked about storylines for you. What are some notable stats and X factors for the Hurricanes that we can expect?
Yeah, I would say really in terms of X factors, I think one of the other big storylines too that we can kind of almost connect it with it is how's Frederik Andersen going to be? Because I know we kind of talked a little bit about it. Of course, you talked about Logan Thompson. If Andersen, by all accounts, he did practice on Friday, he did practice on Saturday too, because all signs are kind of pointing to maybe he will be in net for the Hurricanes, and that's kind of huge because the way he was a brick wall for them in that 3.5 games that he played in. I mean, you look at a guy who went 3-1. Of course, his third one came in when Pyotr Kochetkov came in for relief. Still at a 1.59 goals against, a 936 save percentage, and that's over 226 minutes of ice time, only allowing 6 goals. I mean, outside of the game 3 where he only let in 3 goals in that double overtime, he's given up basically a goal for the most part in games 1, 2, and 4. Other than that, I mean, he had a pretty solid, first round. If the last time we look back at a guy who had like above a 920 save percentage and a goals against average around like the 1.4, 1.5 range was his 5 games that he played back in the 15-16 season with the Anaheim Ducks. And he's right around that same area where he just played dominant hockey in the playoffs. And for his third playoff overall with the Canes, it's probably his best run as of late. And that's still even counting back to the 22-23 playoffs, where he basically just drove the team all the way to the Eastern Conference Final, where that was even also a sub 2 goals against and a save percentage in the 920s. So if you're looking at X factors, if Frederik Andersen could play the way he did in round 1, he could easily steal a game or 2 in this series. And that's why, I know we're going to do predictions later, but if he steals a couple games, this series could look completely different too. And we talk about other X factors. I mean, like I said, there's like Seth Jarvis, looking at, Aho, Svechnikov, all the guys too. I would say look out for, someone like Taylor Hall, who is someone who's a good facilitator of, going after pucks, board battling, setting up guys. He can even score too. So even if you get that other secondary scoring from Taylor Hall, he can be a very big X factor for the Canes. And don't overlook Shane Gostisbehere, someone who came in 3 seasons. He's got a 3-year deal with the Canes starting this year, and someone's going to be quarterback in the power play. And when he was out, they kind of struggled a little bit. They got him back. Power play started going again. So he's someone who's that offensive defense, but who can really kind of drive plays too and drive the power play. And that's why if he's on the ice and if the Hurricanes get some good momentum going on special teams, he's that guy who can shoot the puck really well and put passes in the proper places to get the wheelhouse shot going. So I would say those are some guys that should be really big X factors outside of the big names for the Canes.
So some of the burning questions I had for Carolina is, can their defense tighten up after some shaky performances in round 1? You touched on Andersen being healthy, and can the Hurricanes handle Washington's physicality and net front pressure? So I'm going to talk to you about that here briefly. Physicality seems to be the name of the game. I know that the most recent matchup, it was Jalen Chatfield and the Connor McMichael moment there. And, that was met, and I know I'm looking at this with Capitals colored glasses on. I get that. And, that's just the lay of the land, how things go. But it did appear that that was quite physical. So that the gauntlet has kind of been laid out, that it's going to be a physical series. You got Tom Wilson. Who are some of the perceived and who are the tough guys, shall I say, on the Carolina Hurricanes that the Capitals should look out for? I know that Jalen Chatfield, like I said, jumps off just as the most recent game. But if the Capitals want to lower the boom on the Hurricanes, who answers the bell?
I mean, you're looking at guys. I mean, in terms of like actual just guys who are just going to throw punches, there's some different guys around the roster that could step up when need be. But I mean, you look at Andres Svechnikov's a big power forward. He did no penalties in the first round, which is good for him, but threw hits when necessary. Dmitry Orlov's not afraid to go in there too if he needs to be. A very good hip checker, someone to keep an eye on. He's not afraid to get into it as well. Other big bodies who are not afraid to throw their weight around. Jordan Martinook, Jordan Stahl. I mean, they're the shutdown line for a reason. That's why those are the guys that Rod Brind'Amour throws out. Like, all right, see the best players on the ice? Go stop them. And 9 times out of 10, they basically do. So they're not afraid to get into it as well. I mean, Sean Walker is absolutely afraid of no one as well. He'll go out there and he'll get into, some chirp battles with his guys on the ice too. And it was someone who I think is very underrated, who's been throwing his body a lot more this season and even throwing some big hits in last playoffs that might have not been noticed by other people. Do not underestimate Jesperi Kotkaniemi. He has really thrived in his Jordan Stahl 2.0 defensive center position, where he's a good guy who can defend the puck really well as a center and then can distribute it. But he has thrown some massive hits the last few playoffs and even this regular season too. He's also not afraid to get into. I mean, he even threw down, I think it's with Dylan Cousins of the Sabres, and like on Whalers night, like opening face-off, immediately just went after it in the first 5 seconds, and the Hurricanes won 5-2 because he just got that building absolutely rocking early. So there's some sneaky guys on there who aren't afraid to throw some bodies and let you know about it, especially if you get if ever the meeting of the minds come and want to discuss recipes and restaurants in the middle of the scrum.
So the biggest advantage for the Capitals going into round number 2 is they get to start at cap 1, and that's not something that can be underestimated there. If you have your fan base behind you, if the Capitals can get out to a 2-game advantage, that could be huge. So you take a look at if the Capitals, in fact, will be able to make good on that. That is one of the biggest factors. And can the Capitals' size and physicality overpower Carolina's puck possession game? The Hurricanes struggle with clearing the crease and handling heavy forechecks, areas where the Capitals excel. So physicality would be the big thing. And, like I've talked about, Tom Wilson, is, peppered throughout this episode here, but as an X factor, his impact goes beyond hits and goals. Like I said, in game 4 against the Canadiens, a momentum shifter. So that could be huge if Tom Wilson is engaged, and not a lot like a lot of other goons around the league. That is the perception by outsiders, is that Tom Wilson is a goon, but puts up big goals. And I think that that is what differentiates him between the Reeves, if you will, in the league. So those are the big things as well. And, the burning questions is that can the Capitals continue to do what they did in round number 1? Similar to what the Hurricanes did, decisive victories, all things considered. I'm talking about the Capitals over the Canadiens. I'm talking about the Hurricanes over the Devils. Can they continue to keep that positive momentum going? So we take a look at it. Those are the big things. Net minding, I think that on both respective teams, we're going to need to see the best from the starting netminders. And then kind of if you fan out from there, the top goal scorers. Can the defense, can it step up and win this series for the respective teams. So before we end off on this episode here, I want to get you to weigh in on your prediction on who wins it. I think I might know where you're going to go with this one. And how many games do you think it will take to get it done?
Yeah, and real quick, Dan, I know you talked about Cap One Arena being good for you guys. Hurricanes, same way, 31 wins at home at Lenovo Center. In our regular season series, the Hurricanes won both of their games at home. Were 2-1-1 against the Capitals and outscored them 14-10. So, of course, we all know what you do with the regular season stats, though. Throw it out the window. Doesn't really matter. But that home ice will work both ways for both of our teams. So that should be very, very interesting. Of if you can win at home, great. Can you win the road game? That, I think, is another key thing that for both of our teams. Can you do it in the other's barn? That's the main thing. That being said, my prediction, I would love to say it could be sooner. Maybe if the goalies, get a steal here, maybe. But if someone doesn't work out that way, I got Hurricanes in 7.
Yeah. That's interesting that you say 7. As we talked in the pre-interview, I said Capitals in 7. I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk for either team. I think it's going to be physical. I think it's going to be downright nasty at points. If there is a team that gets an advantage at any point, you got to know that fists are going to be flying. It's going to be a physical series. This is going to be some must-see TV. Listen, Zach, I want to thank you for joining me on this crossover edition of Locked On Capitals and Locked On Hurricanes. Why don't you tell everyone where we can find you online?
Yeah, of course. And Dan, thank you for being able to host this crossover. It's a lot of fun talking to you. But yeah, if you want to check me out, One True Zach on X. Of course, the podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky at thezacharymartin.com. I got link trees, so you can find all of my writing that I do at the Hockey Writers. Of course, you can check out where to listen and watch Locked On Hurricanes.
All right, and I want to thank Zach Martin of Locked On Hurricanes for joining me on this special crossover edition of Locked On Capitals. And I want to thank all of you for making this your first listen of the day. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, as they have you covered 5 days a week, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube.